My name is Margaret Daniels. I'm 82 years old. I was born in a small town in Ohio, raised 3 children, and worked as a seamstress for most of my life. I gave everything I had, my love, my strength, my time, to build a life for my family. But nothing prepared me for the moment my only surviving son left me on a stranger's porch with nothing but a suitcase and a folded note tucked into my hand. It was raining. Not a soft drizzle, but a cold, punishing downpour that soaked my thin cardigan the moment he closed the car door behind me. I stood on the porch of a house I didn't recognize, heart pounding like a frightened bird in my chest. "Mom, this is better for all of us," Brian had said, barely meeting my eyes. "You'll be fine here." Then he drove off. I opened the note with trembling hands. It read, "You're no longer needed. Please don't make this harder than it already is." No explanation. No apology. Just 10 words that shattered 82 years of motherhood, sacrifice, and memory. Before I could even knock, the door creaked open. A young woman I'd never seen before stood there, confusion clouding her eyes. Behind her, 2 children peeked around the corner. The smell of dinner wafted through the warm air inside. "Can I help you?" she asked. I couldn't speak. My voice felt locked in my throat, held hostage by betrayal. I simply handed her the note. Her eyebrows knitted together as she read it. Then slowly she stepped aside and said, "Come in, please. Let's get you warm first." But I didn't move, because at that moment I realized something terrifying. I didn't know where I was. And worse, Brian had blocked my phone number. Let me take you back to the beginning. Before that note. Before that porch. Before the rain. Before my world collapsed under the feet of the very child I had raised. Back when I still believed my son loved me. It started 2 years ago, not long after my fall in the garden. I had tripped over the edge of the hose while pulling weeds from the roses. I fractured my hip and had to spend 3 weeks in the hospital. Brian was there that first week. He brought flowers and said things like, "You're still strong, Ma." But something shifted. The calls became shorter. The visits less frequent. "You should think about moving in with us," he said one Sunday afternoon. His wife, Amanda, sat stiffly on the edge of her chair, her mouth a tight line. I didn't want to be a burden, so I said yes. First it was fine. I had my own room. The grandkids visited me after school. But there were rules. Don't touch the thermostat. Don't use the oven. Don't walk around after 8 p.m. And above all, stay out of Amanda's way. I told myself I was imagining things, that it was just an adjustment, but the signs were there. Amanda never looked me in the eye. She'd whisper behind doors. Brian would say, "She's tired, Ma. Don't take it personal." But how could I not? One evening I overheard them in the kitchen. "She's old, Brian. We can't keep babysitting her. She's my mother. She's in the way." The next morning my access to the family bank account, where my pension checks went, was mysteriously blocked. When I asked Brian, he waved it off. "Amanda's just organizing things. For taxes." Weeks passed, then months. The loneliness became a blanket I couldn't shake. I felt like a guest in my own bloodline. I tried to keep myself busy. Knitted scarves. Made my famous apple pie. Helped the kids with homework. But I could feel it, the tension. Like I was sitting on a chair made of eggshells. Then, on the morning of my birthday, I came downstairs to an empty kitchen. No card. No cake. Just a sticky note on the fridge that read, "Back later. Pizza in freezer." That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I cried in the bathroom so no one would hear. I covered my mouth with a towel. I started thinking of the home I left behind. The small house with the creaky stairs. The porch swing. The rose garden. It was still in my name. But Brian had taken the deed to handle the paperwork when I moved in. Then one Saturday Brian told me to pack a small bag. "We're going to see someone," he said. I thought maybe it was a new doctor. Maybe a friend. Maybe even a surprise. I clung to that hope like a child. But he didn't drive to a doctor's office. Or a park. Or anywhere familiar. He took me to a house I'd never seen before and told me, "This is better for all of us." Then he drove away. Now here I was, on a stranger's porch, in the rain. The young woman, her name was Ellie, brought me inside. She gave me dry clothes and a cup of warm tea. Her children stared silently as I sipped, hands trembling. Ellie didn't know me. She had no idea why I was there. "I think your son means for you to stay here," she said gently. But I never agreed to anything. I looked down at my tea. The warmth didn't reach the cold knot in my chest. "I don't have anywhere else to go," I whispered. Ellie sat down across from me. Her face was kind but unsure. "Well," she said, "we'll figure this out. Somehow." But I could see it in her eyes. She was just as lost as I was. And then that night I heard a knock on the door. Ellie opened it and gasped, 'cause standing there was someone I hadn't seen in over 50 years. If this story pulled at your heart, don't scroll past. Like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for the rest of Margaret's journey. Her story is only just beginning. I sat frozen on the couch, the blanket Ellie had given me clutched around my shoulders, my teacup halfway to my lips. I heard her gasp before I saw anything. My body tensed like an old spring. Something in the air shifted. The door creaked open just enough to let the wind carry in a face I never thought I'd see again. "Margaret!" The voice was hoarse, uncertain, as though time had stolen its confidence. I turned my head slowly. There, standing on Ellie's front porch, with a faded blue cap in his hands and a wrinkled coat clinging to his thin frame, was Walter. Walter Greer. My first love. The man I almost married 60 years ago. My heart stuttered in my chest. I blinked twice, unsure if grief, age, or exhaustion was playing tricks on me. But no, it was him. The same warm hazel eyes, now clouded with time. The same slanted smile, tired but there. Ellie looked between us. "You two know each other." Walter stepped inside, his boots squeaking against the tiles. "I live next door," he said. "Came by to borrow some salt." Then I saw her, and thought I was looking at a ghost. Ellie nodded slowly and disappeared into the kitchen, giving us space. Walter walked toward me like a man trying not to scare a wounded animal. He sat down in the chair across from me, not too close, but close enough that I could see the disbelief swimming in his eyes. "I thought you moved out west," he whispered. "I did." My voice cracked. "And then I moved again. And again. Life got messy." Walter nodded. We sat in silence for a few long minutes. Outside, the wind whipped at the windows. "I never married," he said finally. "Not after you left." My throat tightened. I hadn't thought of Walter in decades. Life with Brian's father had been difficult, full of sacrifices and regrets. But that part of my story will come later. Right now I had bigger questions. Why did Brian bring me here? I asked aloud, not even expecting Walter to have the answer. He frowned. "I don't know what arrangements he made with Ellie. But this doesn't feel right." I looked into his eyes. For the first time in a long while, someone looked back with concern. Genuine, soft concern, not obligation, not duty. I think I've been abandoned," I whispered. He didn't argue, didn't try to sugarcoat it. He simply said, "Then let's get you unabandoned." That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in the guest bedroom Ellie had cleared out for me. The bed was soft but unfamiliar. The air smelled of fresh paint and baby powder. Her children whispered down the hall, and I wondered what story Ellie would tell them about the strange old woman sleeping in their house. I stared at the ceiling and thought about the day I gave birth to Brian. He was perfect. I remember holding him in my arms and promising to protect him always. I raised him mostly on my own after his father passed. I worked 2 jobs, skipped meals so he could eat, sold my mother's wedding ring to pay for his college application fees. So how did we get here? How does a son forget the hands that held him, the lips that kissed away his fevers, the woman who walked barefoot through snow just to attend his school recital? The next morning, Ellie knocked gently on my door. "Margaret," Someone's at the door again. He says he knows you. My stomach dropped. I followed her to the hallway, heart racing, wondering if Brian had returned to explain or apologize. But when I turned the corner, it wasn't Brian. It was a man in a suit, holding a clipboard. "Are you Margaret Daniels?" he asked, already checking something off his list. "Yes," I said hesitantly. "I'm here from St. Joseph's Assisted Living. Your son arranged for you to be picked up today." My knees went weak. "Picked up?" "Yes," he said briskly. "He signed all the paperwork yesterday. You're listed as a voluntary resident." "I never signed anything," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "That's unusual." Walter stepped forward. "She's not going anywhere until we sort this out." Ellie moved protectively beside me. But the man was unfazed. "Look, I'm just doing my job. If you choose to refuse placement, that's your right. But it will become a legal matter if her son reports her as mentally unfit and without care." I felt my breath leave me. This was Brian's plan. Not just to leave me but to disappear me. Quietly. Without a fuss. "I'm not crazy," I said softly, my voice barely holding. "I still have my mind. I still have my rights." But the man just handed me a pamphlet, nodded and walked away. We watched his car pull off, the silence between us heavy and full of questions. Walter turned to me and said, "You need a lawyer. And you need to get your house back." I stared at him. "My house," I whispered. "He took the deed. Said it was for safety. Said it would protect me." Walter nodded grimly. "We're going to fix that." That evening, Walter called an old friend, one who happened to be a retired estate attorney. Meanwhile, Ellie made calls to Adult Protective Services, explaining the situation. For the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't alone. But as the sun set and the children went to bed, I received a text from an unknown number. It read, "You're making this harder than it needs to be. Stop digging or you'll regret it." I stared at the message, hands trembling, because it wasn't signed, and I wasn't sure if it was from my son or someone far more dangerous. If this chapter left your heart pounding, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Margaret's fight has just begun, and it's about to get even more shocking. I stared at the phone screen long after the message disappeared. My hands trembled, not because of my age, but because of the fear crawling through my chest like something alive. The message wasn't signed, but deep down I knew. Had to be Brian, or someone working for him. "You okay?" Ellie's voice broke through the silence as she leaned in the doorway, holding a tray of soup. Forced a nod. "Yes, sweetheart. Just tired." But I wasn't tired. I was wide awake now. Awake in ways I hadn't been in years. My son had made a decision to erase me from his life. Not just emotionally but legally. Permanently. Walter returned later that evening with a notebook full of scribbles and a copy of a property transfer form he'd pulled from the public deed records online. "Margaret," he said, sitting beside me. "I'm sorry, but it looks like your house was signed over completely to Brian. About 4 months ago. Witnessed and notarized." "But I never signed anything," I whispered. Ellie looked horrified. "Then that means he forged it." Walter's mouth was a tight line. Or tricked her into signing something she didn't understand. My mind reeled. 4 months ago was when Amanda started pressuring me to sign some health forms. I remembered now. The blue folder, the rushed explanations, the way Brian hovered while I wrote my name. I never read the whole thing. "Walter, what can I do?" Asked. "Do I even have a chance?" He leaned forward, his voice low and firm. "Yes, but you'll need to fight. And it won't be pretty." A lump rose in my throat. I hadn't fought for myself in so long. I didn't remember how. But I remembered the way Brian looked at me before driving off that rainy day. Like I was a package to be dropped off, not a person. That look lit something in me. I was done being the quiet grandmother in the corner. Walter connected me with his lawyer friend, Mr. Whitaker, who agreed to meet with me the next day. The man was in his 70s, wore thick glasses, and carried a worn leather briefcase like it was a part of him. He listened carefully as I explained everything, from the forged documents to the note to the phone message. He asked pointed questions, took meticulous notes. Then he said something that stopped me cold. "Do you have any financial records? Any proof of your pension or property ownership prior to the transfer?" I thought back to the day I packed my bag for Brian's mystery trip. Amanda had rushed me, said we didn't have time. I had left everything, my files, my safe deposit keys, even my address book, in my old bedroom. "I have nothing," I said, defeated. Mr. Whittaker looked me dead in the eye. "Then we'll get it. If there's a trail, I'll find it." Walter offered to drive me back to my old house. Ellie insisted on coming too. She said if things got ugly, I shouldn't be alone. When we pulled up to the old driveway, something inside me ached. The rose bushes I had nurtured for 40 years were dry and dying. The porch swing Brian helped build when he was 16 hung broken and lopsided. It wasn't home anymore. I rang the doorbell. No answer. Walter tried knocking. Still nothing. But Ellie noticed a car parked in the back. "They're home," she whispered. Walter narrowed his eyes. "Then they're hiding." I stepped forward, steeling myself. I wasn't leaving without my documents. Without answers. I banged on the door louder this time. And finally it opened. Amanda stood there, arms crossed, her lips curled into that same cold smirk she always wore when she thought she was right. "What are you doing here?" she said flatly. "I came for my things," I said, keeping my voice steady. "The documents, keys, everything you and Brian took." Amanda rolled her eyes. "You left. Voluntarily. We didn't take anything." Ellie stepped forward. "She didn't leave. She was dumped on a stranger's porch like trash. That's elder abuse." Amanda flinched slightly but recovered fast. "Call it whatever you want. She's not coming in." Walter, ever the calm force, pulled out a printed letter. "This is a legal notice of document retrieval. If you block her access, you'll face consequences." Amanda grabbed the paper, scanned it, and laughed. "You think a piece of paper scares me?" Then a voice boomed behind her. "Maybe it will when it comes from a judge." Brian appeared in the hallway, his expression unreadable. We all froze. I hadn't seen his face since he drove away. He looked tired, angrier, more distant. "I told you not to come back, Mom," he said. "And I told you I'm not done being your mother," I replied. For a moment we just stared at each other. 2 lifetimes clashing in silence. "I gave you everything," I said. "And you gave me abandonment." Brian didn't answer. Walter stepped in again. "You forged a deed. That's a felony." Brian finally looked at me. "I did what was best for my family." I felt something crack inside me. "And I'm not family." Amanda stepped between us. "You're a liability. A bitter old woman clinging to a past that doesn't belong to her anymore." Lee gasped. "But I didn't break. Not this time. You can insult me. You can throw me out. But you can't erase me," I said. That's when Brian said it. The line that burned into me like acid. "You're no longer needed, Mother. Get that through your head." And then, he slammed the door in my face. The next morning, Mr. Whittaker filed an emergency injunction. We launched a full legal investigation. Walter dug up records. Ellie found an old family friend who had a copy of my will. But as we fought to take back my rights, something even darker surfaced. A financial trail linked not just to Brian, but to Amanda. And it led to a company I didn't even know existed. A company in my name. Backhand index pointing right Mediumson and Margaret's story is just heating up. If you believe in justice for our elders and quiet strength rising, don't scroll without liking, commenting and subscribing. The truth is unraveling. Faster than anyone expected. The moment Mr. Whittaker slid the printouts across the table, my heart sank. My name, Margaret E. Daniels, was on the official records of a company called Golden Ribbon LLC. I blinked. Sounded like one of those fake corporations people use for money laundering in movies. Except this wasn't a movie. This was real. And somehow, my name was at the center of it. What is this? I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. Mr. Whitaker adjusted his glasses and tapped the paper. This company was registered about 6 months ago using your name, social security number, and home address. And it's listed as receiving over $180,000 in pension and disability transfers since then. But I never. I know, he said, nodding gently. That's the point. You never opened it. Which means someone else did. Using your identity. Walter's fists clenched beside me. Lee gasped. They didn't just dump you, she said. They stole you. Covered my mouth. A bitter taste crept up my throat. All those nights I thought I was crazy, paranoid, just old. I wasn't. I had been quietly erased, reshaped on paper into a source of income. My own son and his wife had been profiting from my existence, while trying to erase me from it. And if they succeeded in putting me in a care facility, they would keep collecting. The truth made me feel sick. They planned this, I murmured more to myself than anyone. Every single piece. They took the house, my checks, name, and tried to hide me away like I was luggage that didn't fit in the closet anymore. Mr. Whitaker nodded grimly. The good news is we now have evidence of identity theft, fraud, and elder financial abuse. We can file charges and freeze their assets while we investigate further. I stared down at my name on the paper. How strange, how painful to feel like a stranger to your own identity. But something inside me sparked. Something sharper than sadness. Fury. Walter placed a steady hand on my shoulder. We're going to make this right, Maggie. That afternoon, we filed an official police report and handed over the company records to a detective named Linda Archer. She was sharp-eyed, no-nonsense, and had a grandmother of her own. The kind of woman who didn't like abusers, especially the ones hiding behind blood ties. I'll get to work right away, she promised. But in the meantime you need to be careful. If they realize you're fighting back, they may escalate. That night I couldn't sleep again. Not out of fear this time but out of heartbreak. I had loved Brian with my whole soul. He had been a colicky baby, a curious toddler, a bright teenager. I used to press my lips to his forehead every night and whisper prayers over him. When he cried, I rocked him. When he got into trouble, I defended him. I worked my fingers raw so he'd never have to feel the ache of poverty. And now, he called me a liability, a ghost, no longer needed. I sat in the darkened kitchen of Ellie's home, wrapped in a shawl, staring at the quiet hum of the refrigerator. When Ellie walked in and saw me, she poured 2 mugs of tea without a word and sat beside me. You okay? She asked. I smiled weakly. I'm used to hiding my hurt. But tonight I'm letting it show. Ellie nodded slowly. You don't deserve what they did to you. I gave them everything, I said. And they took more than I had left. She reached over and squeezed my hand. Well now, you take it back. Every single piece. The next morning the real war began. Detective Archer called to inform us that Amanda had emptied their joint savings account overnight, close to $60,000, after the fraud notice was served. They were likely preparing to flee. They might try to move everything offshore, she warned. We need to freeze assets now. Mr. Whitaker moved fast. Court orders were filed. Bank notifications were sent. But it was a race against time. By mid-afternoon, Ellie's front door received another visitor. This time, it was Amanda. She stood there in oversized sunglasses, a scarf over her head, dressed like she was auditioning for a bad detective show. I stood behind the doorframe. She didn't see me. I just want to talk to Ellie, she said sweetly. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Walter stepped forward, blocking her entrance. The only misunderstanding here is how you thought you could destroy this woman and walk away untouched. Amanda's face changed in an instant. The sugary smile soured. Her eyes hardened. Tell Margaret she better stop this nonsense before she embarrasses herself, she hissed. She has nothing. We already made sure of that. And just like that, she turned and marched back to her car. But in that moment, she didn't realize I had recorded the entire thing from behind the door. Her threat, her tone, her arrogance. It would be her undoing. Later that evening, Ellie's youngest child brought me an envelope he found under the doormat. No postage. No name. Inside were printed screenshots. Photos of me. Some recent. Some from inside Brian's house. Some from the hospital. Someone had been documenting my life. Watching me. Cataloging everything. And on the back of one photo, scrawled in thick black marker, were the words, "Old women don't win wars. They just disappear." My breath caught. 'Cause it wasn't just fraud anymore. Someone wanted me gone. Backhand index pointing right, medium skin tone. If this chapter shook you, please like, share and subscribe. Margaret's story is spiraling into darker waters, but she's far from done fighting. Justice is coming. And it won't be quiet. I clutched the envelope to my chest as if doing so would stop the tremble in my bones. But it didn't. Couldn't. I'd spent most of my life being strong for everyone else. My children, my late husband, my community. But in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hunted. Ellie took one look at the photos and swore under her breath. She called Walter, who arrived within 10 minutes, and together we laid everything on the table under the kitchen light. Photo after photo of me going about my life, unaware. Grocery store, the doctor's clinic, even one of me napping on the back porch during my time at Brian's house. Each image was time-stamped, labeled, and the handwriting on the back of that final photo. Walter stared at it, then pulled out a file folder from his briefcase. He flipped through until he found an old insurance form from my house, signed by Amanda. He laid the two papers side by side. "It's her," he said. "The handwriting matches. This wasn't just some digital scam. She's been documenting you. For months." "But why?" Ellie asked, horrified. "Because she was preparing a case," I whispered. "A fake one. Probably to have me declared mentally unfit. They weren't just planning to steal my identity. They were building a story to destroy it." Walter leaned over and said something I'll never forget. "They thought you were too old to fight. But they forgot that some of the fiercest fighters wear orthopedic shoes." We all laughed briefly, bitterly. The laughter died down when Detective Archer called again. "There's been a break in the case," she said. "We traced some of the pension payments through Golden Ribbon LLC to a dummy account in your name. The funds were then rerouted to a private investment account belonging to Amanda. But here's the part that concerns me most. Some of that money was used to buy insurance. A life insurance policy. On you." The world slowed. "On me?" "Yes, ma'am. A $500,000 policy taken out just last month. And according to the documents, Amanda listed herself as your caretaker and sole beneficiary." I dropped the phone. Ellie caught it before it hit the floor. "What did she say?" she asked, eyes wide. "They put out a life insurance policy, in case I died," I said numbly. "She's betting on my death." There was silence in the room. And then Ellie's voice, shaking with rage. "That's not just fraud. That's attempted murder. Planned, cold, and calculated." Walter stood. "We need a protective order. Now." Over the next 2 days, my life turned into a whirlwind of police meetings, emergency court hearings, and protective arrangements. Ellie and Walter never left my side. Whitaker filed a cease and desist against Amanda and Brian, and pushed forward an injunction to freeze the insurance payout. But what terrified me wasn't what they had already done. It was what they were willing to do. Amanda was desperate. Brian weak and easily manipulated. And now their golden plan to live off my pension and claim my life policy was unraveling before their eyes. I knew they wouldn't go down without a fight. Sure enough, it came, on a Tuesday morning. Ellie had gone out for groceries with the kids. Walter was meeting Mr. Whitaker at the courthouse. I was home alone, sitting in the living room, writing in my notebook. Then I heard it. The back door creaked. Not the front, the back. Froze. My walker was out of reach. my phone on the kitchen counter. I sat perfectly still, heart pounding like a trapped bird. And then footsteps, low, measured, drawing closer. I pressed myself against the armrest, praying it was Ellie, maybe having returned early, maybe she'd forgotten her wallet. But the silhouette that rounded the corner into the living room was not Ellie. It was Amanda, wearing gloves. No smile this time, just cold, hard eyes. "I told you to stop, Margaret," she said. "You didn't listen." I said nothing. She looked around, saw the house was empty, and stepped closer. "You could have just gone quietly. But now you've made us look like criminals." I forced my voice to be strong. "You are criminals." A smirk. "Not yet." Amanda reached into her coat and pulled out something silver. My vision blurred for a moment, but when I blinked again I saw it clearly. Syringe. I screamed. Not a loud, wild scream, but the kind of primal cry that comes from deep in the soul when your body knows it might not survive the next breath. Amanda lunged. But just then, the door slammed open. Walter. He had returned early. He tackled her to the floor so hard the syringe flew across the room. Ellie ran in seconds later, saw the chaos and grabbed the kids, locking them in her room before calling the police. Amanda fought like a demon possessed, biting, clawing, but Walter held her down with a strength I didn't know he had left in him. By the time the police arrived, Amanda was screaming at the top of her lungs, cursing everyone, and claiming I had attacked her. But it was too late. The house had security cameras. Every second was captured. Every word, every move. And I had my proof. Amanda was arrested for attempted assault with a deadly weapon and elder abuse. Brian later that night turned himself in, after trying to flee with what little money he had left. He claimed he didn't know about the syringe. But the police found printed emails between him and Amanda detailing options if she refuses to cooperate. They had been planning to institutionalize me or worse. And now they'd face the consequences. But even as I sat in the living room after they were taken away, hands wrapped around my mug of tea, I didn't feel triumphant. Felt hollow. Because as much as they had betrayed me, they were still family. And family, once broken, doesn't always come back whole. But what I didn't know then was that the final twist hadn't come yet. 1 week later I received a letter. From an unknown law firm. A letter that revealed something even Brian didn't know. Something that would change the rest of my life. Backhand index pointing right medium skin tone. If this chapter shook you to your core, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Margaret's strength just saved her life. But the next truth waiting around the corner might break it all over again. The envelope was thick. Heavy. Its texture reminded me of the kind of paper used for birth certificates or marriage licenses. The kind of paper that carried weight not just physically but emotionally. Had no return address. Just a stamp from another state and a crisp handwritten note. Margaret E. Daniels. Confidential. I opened it with trembling hands while Walter and Ellie looked on. Inside was a neatly typed letter from a law firm called Ridgewell and Grant. I'd never heard of them. But as I read the first few lines, my throat tightened. Dear Ms. Daniels, we regret to inform you that your son, Brian Daniels, was not listed as the sole heir in the estate plan established by your late husband, Gerald Daniels. Our firm was retained by your husband in 1989 to manage a private trust account, to be kept confidential and to be revealed only in the event of elder abuse or family conflict. My mouth went dry. Kept reading. Due to a series of recent legal filings and public reports surrounding your name, our system flagged your case and automatically triggered a review of the dormant trust. Per Mr. Daniels' wishes, we are to disclose the following. You are the sole beneficiary of a financial estate worth $3.7 million, including investment property holdings, a commercial building in Cincinnati, and a substantial portfolio of municipal bonds. These assets were placed under a protective trust over 30 years ago. I dropped the letter. My vision blurred. Ellie caught me before I tipped sideways on the couch. Walter picked it up, reading silently, his brow furrowing deeper with every line. There's more, he murmured. Gerald left an audio statement. It's on the included USB drive. Ellie ran to get her laptop. We plugged in the USB. The screen flickered to life. The voice that came through hit me like a ghost to the chest. It was Gerald, my husband, the man I had buried nearly 32 years ago. Margaret, if you're hearing this. Then something went wrong. His voice cracked. I've watched Brian. I've seen the way Amanda looks at you. You never did because you loved them too much. But I know how greedy people get when they see a woman grow older. They think she's slowing down. They forget she was once the fire that held the family together. I covered my mouth, tears streaming. This trust is for you. For all the years you sacrificed. For the late nights. For putting your dreams aside. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd insist on giving it away. But I needed to protect you from them. If Brian or Amanda ever hurt you, fight. Don't you dare go quiet. You have the means now. The audio ended with silence. But I wasn't silent. Not out of sadness. But from the violent collision of relief and rage. Gerald had known. He had loved me all along and he saw what I couldn't. Ellie sat beside me, hugging me like I was her own grandmother. Walter smiled softly. Looks like the tides just turned. But I didn't want revenge. I wanted justice. So we got to work. We filed a claim to move the trust under my direct control. Ridgewell and Grant appointed a private investigator to trace every illegal transfer Brian had made under my name. The building in Cincinnati was still standing, a small strip mall rented by local businesses. The bonds were worth even more today than when they'd been purchased. But even with the money, my heart still ached. I sat in the courtroom during Brian and Amanda's arraignment. I didn't dress fancy. I wore the same blue dress I'd worn to Brian's high school graduation. The one I'd hand-sewn late into the night, just to save enough for his class ring. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Amanda looked cold and unbothered until the prosecutor brought up the syringe incident and played the recording. The courtroom fell quiet. I stood and read my statement. You tried to erase me. You thought I was too old, too tired, too alone. But you forgot that age doesn't make us weak, it makes us wise. You forgot that a mother's silence doesn't mean she's blind. And you forgot that love isn't a license to be used. It's a privilege. You took my home, my name, and almost my life. But now, I'm taking it all back. The judge nodded. The charges held. Bail was denied. But justice didn't stop in that courtroom. With the help of Ridgewell and Grant, I sued them both for financial abuse, identity theft, and emotional distress. The court froze all their remaining assets and awarded me full restitution. Ellie and Walter helped me move into a beautiful assisted living cottage near the Cincinnati property. I wasn't weak. I just didn't want to be alone. And now, I had choices. I renovated the cottage with roses just like the ones I left behind. I created a small scholarship fund in Gerald's name, for children of elderly caregivers. I also started visiting local senior centers, speaking to other women who had suffered in silence like me. I told them, you are never too old to fight. You are never too forgotten to be remembered. But one morning I got a letter from prison. From Brian. Dear Mom, if I could take it back I would. See it now. I see all of it. Amanda's gone. She filed for separation. And I have nothing left but regret. You didn't deserve what I did. I just thought, maybe if I controlled the money you wouldn't leave me too. But I became everything I feared. Hope you're okay. Really do. I'll never ask for forgiveness, but I needed to say I'm sorry. I folded the letter. And I forgave him. Not because he earned it, but because I refused to carry the weight of his choices anymore. Backhand index pointing right medium skin on. If Margaret's story gave you goosebumps, don't stop now. Like, comment, and subscribe. She may have won the courtroom battle, but healing a broken heart takes more than justice. It takes courage. Forgiveness is a strange thing. Doesn't come with applause. There's no parade, no medal, no sudden weight lifted. Sometimes it just settles into your bones like warm tea on a cold day. Quiet. Necessary. I placed Brian's letter back into the envelope and slid it into a wooden box I kept by my nightstand. The same box that once held his baby shoes, his first tooth, and a dried daisy he gave me when he was 6. A lifetime of memories, both golden and painful, folded into a single space. But I didn't cry. I had cried enough. Instead, I got dressed. I had a community meeting to attend at the senior center. We were discussing how to set up a legal awareness workshop for elderly women, how to recognize signs of financial manipulation, how to set up safeguards. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was doing. After the meeting, I stepped out into the garden. The sun was warm, the air humming with the scent of marigolds. Ellie was waiting by the bench with her youngest child, little Sarah, who now called me Grandma Mags, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Margaret," Ellie said, smiling, "I just wanted you to know. You've changed our lives. Not just because you lived with us, but because you showed me what quiet bravery looks like." I held her hand. "You saved me, Ellie. You didn't have to open your door that night. But you did." She smiled, but then her phone buzzed. She frowned. "It's a voicemail. From an unknown number." She played it. We both listened, and as the voice poured from the speaker, my skin turned cold. "This isn't over. You may have won the legal game, but we still have cards left to play. You took everything from us. Now we'll return the favor." No name, no number. But the voice. Amanda. Closed my eyes. She was supposed to be behind bars. But I remembered something from the court proceedings. Her lawyer had filed an appeal. She'd requested house arrest pending trial due to medical complications. The judge had been on the fence. And now, she was out. Ellie looked terrified. "Do you think she'll come here?" Walter joined us on the bench moments later after I called him. We played him the voicemail. He nodded slowly. "She's not done." I knew it. "But what could she want now?" Lee asked. "She's lost everything." Walter sighed. "Desperate people don't fight for what they've already lost. They fight for revenge." I refused to run. I refused to hide. I had built a new life. A peaceful one, meaningful and full of purpose. I would not let Amanda tear it down. But I also wasn't naive. We needed protection. That night, I filed for a no-contact order and had new security installed at the cottage. Motion detectors. Cameras. Walter helped reinforce the windows. Ellie moved into the guest room with the kids for a few days, just in case. Still, the shadows felt longer that week. One morning I walked out to the mailbox and found a small box sitting on top. Had no stamp. No label. I brought it inside. Opened it. Inside was a pair of pearl earrings. Stolen from my dresser at Brian's house months ago. And a note. Something borrowed. Next, something broken. I staggered backward, the room spinning. Ellie rushed in, caught me, steadied me. I handed her the note. She read it, then called Detective Archer without a second's pause. The police took the box for fingerprints, but we knew Amanda was careful. What they didn't expect, however, was the footage from the neighbor's backyard camera. Amanda, hooded, sneaking around my porch at 3 a.m. With proof in hand, the police moved quickly. A warrant was issued. But when they arrived at her temporary residence, she was gone, left everything behind, and took her rage with her. We were told to be vigilant. She was dangerous now, unhinged. Brian remained behind bars, stunned by Amanda's escape, swearing he had no contact with her since the trial. But I didn't believe him. Not fully. Something told me this was far from over. 2 days later, a brick was thrown through my window. Inside the shattered glass was a single word painted in red. Erased. Walter arrived within minutes. He didn't ask for permission. He boarded up the window, changed all the locks again, and moved into the guest room next to mine. "I'm not leaving," he said simply. "Not until she's gone for good." And that night, just as the rain began to fall, I made a decision. If Amanda wanted to play games, I'd give her one she wouldn't expect. The next morning I held a press conference. With help from Ellie's social media savvy niece and Walter's legal network, I stood in front of dozens of flashing cameras. I told the world my story. From the moment Brian drove off and left me at Ellie's door, to the forged documents, the stolen money, the false insurance policy, the syringe, the threats, and now, Amanda's final desperate acts of revenge. I ended with this. Elder abuse is not just bruises and broken bones. It's silence. It's financial control. It's isolation. It's the quiet decision made behind closed doors to treat someone like a burden instead of a blessing. I may be 82, but I am not fragile. I am not invisible. And I am not done living. The video went viral. Hundreds of thousands of people, young and old, shared it, commented, told their own stories. Elder abuse hotlines reported a spike in calls. Senior centers reached out asking to host me for talks. People called me brave. But I didn't feel brave. Felt tired. And I knew Amanda had seen the video. That same night, Ellie found an envelope taped to her car window. It had no threat this time. Only a photo of my old house. And fire. I fell to my knees. The house Brian stole. The place I raised him. The place Gerald and I had built together. Burned to the ground. Ellie's hand flew to her mouth. Walter called 911 while I stared at the image in silence. There was a message written in thick ink across the photo. If I can't have your name, no one can. Amanda wasn't just desperate now. She was dangerous. And I realized. She wasn't just after money. She wanted to destroy everything I ever touched. But she didn't know that I had one more card to play. One she never saw coming. Backhand index pointing right mediums. And if your heart is pounding like ours, don't stop now. Like, comment, and subscribe. Margaret is preparing for the final move. And this time, Amanda won't walk away untouched. The final showdown is near. The fire took everything. My rose garden. The creaky porch swing. The bedroom where I held Brian for the first time. It was all ash now, reduced to smoke and char by a woman who couldn't handle defeat. Amanda had made it clear. This was war. But what she didn't understand was that I had already died once. That night on the stranger's porch when Brian handed me that note and drove away. That was the end of the woman who stayed quiet. What rose from that moment wasn't fragile. It was fireproof. The next morning, I stood before the burned remains of my home, wrapped in Walter's coat, the air thick with smoke and memory. Firefighters had contained the damage, but there was no saving it. The investigator confirmed what we already suspected. Celerant. Intentional. Arson. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing, the fire chief said grimly. And they wanted to make sure nothing could be salvaged. Walter stood beside me, jaw clenched. Ellie was on her phone coordinating with news outlets and the police. Amanda wasn't hiding anymore. She was declaring herself. But this time I had something she didn't. The nation's eyes. The viral video of my story had taken on a life of its own. People were outraged. Elder abuse shelters reported a surge in donations. Retired judges and politicians spoke out. Journalists began calling my phone directly. Offers poured in from across the country. But I didn't want fame. I wanted accountability. So we gave the people what they wanted. Proof. The photos Amanda left at my cottage. The syringe. The brick through my window. The voicemail. The security footage of her sneaking around in the night. The insurance policy. A fire. Detective Archer confirmed that all of it created a perfect storm for what the DA needed. A case for attempted murder, arson, and aggravated harassment. They issued a statewide manhunt. Amanda's face was on every screen. She'd gone too far. But in the chaos, another revelation emerged. One I hadn't expected. While combing through the destroyed house's property archives, a forensic accountant uncovered a second identity theft. One that dated back years before the recent golden ribbon scam. Second company. Different bank. And this time, it wasn't Amanda's name on the routing numbers. It was Brian's. Walter was there when the news came in. He sat beside me, gently holding my hand. It wasn't just Amanda, I whispered. He's been stealing from me for years. Walter nodded slowly. He let her take the fall to shield himself. Amanda may be dangerous. But Brian, he's been quietly bleeding you dry. The weight of that realization hit me harder than the fire. I had convinced myself Amanda was the mastermind and Brian the manipulated. But now, I saw clearly, he had always been complicit. Not weak, strategic. He'd weaponized Amanda's boldness to hide his cowardice. And now they were both on the run. That evening, Ellie's niece, who had helped us post the first video, suggested something bold. Go live, she said. Tell them what Brian did too. Let the world know. Don't just react. Take control of the narrative. So I did. I went live. In a trembling but determined voice, I looked straight into the camera and spoke. My name is Margaret Daniels. I'm 82 years old. And I've survived more in the last 3 months than some do in a lifetime. I was abandoned, robbed, hunted, threatened. My home was burned to the ground. But I am still here. Brian Daniels is my son. I raised him with my heart in my hands. I gave him everything. And in return, he tried to bury me quietly. He thought no one would notice. But now the world sees. If you're watching this and you've been silenced, if you've been told you're no longer needed, let me tell you, you are not done yet. The video reached over 6 million views in 48 hours. Anonymous tips began pouring in. 2 days later, Amanda was spotted in an abandoned motel just outside St. Louis. She was arrested without incident. Hello. She had no money left. No friends. Just a string of fake IDs and a duffel bag of burner phones. Brian, however, was harder to find. Until the biggest twist of all came in the form of a knock at Ellie's door. It was Brian's ex-wife, Sarah. She looked nervous but resolute. I saw the video, she said. And I think you need to see something. Sarah handed me a flash drive. Inside. Recordings. Dozens of them. Phone calls. Voice notes. Planning sessions between Brian and Amanda. Months before I ever moved in. They discussed guardianship traps, property transfers, medical declarations, even rehearsed lines to tell police and doctors to make me look unstable. I sat in silence, jaw clenched, while Brian's voice echoed from the speakers. We need to control the narrative. If she dies in her sleep, it'll look natural. She's old. That's what they expect. Ellie turned pale. Walter stormed out of the room, pacing with fists clenched. Sarah swallowed hard. I left him when I started to suspect. Took the kids. Changed our names. But I kept the recordings. Just in case. We handed the drive to Detective Archer immediately. This wasn't just a case anymore. This was premeditation. Brian was charged in absentia with conspiracy to commit murder, financial fraud, and elder abuse. And the next day, he was found, hiding in a storage unit, just 3 blocks from where he dropped me off that rainy night. He didn't fight the arrest, didn't speak, just stared at the ground like a man who had finally been caught by the very ghost he tried to bury. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed and let the silence sink in. No more running. No more threats. Just silence. But it wasn't empty. It was peaceful. I looked over at the photo on my dresser. Gerald and I on our wedding day. The edges yellowed, the faces younger. I smiled at it. You were right, I whispered. I didn't need to scream. I just needed to stand. The lawsuits went forward. The press moved on to other stories. But for those who followed mine, for those who felt what I lived through, they kept writing, calling, reaching out. Some even visited. Older women who had been through the same. Who had handed over power too quietly. And together, we started something. The Daniels Foundation for Elder Justice. Named not for the family that betrayed me, but for the one I was reclaiming. And as the sun set on the evening of our launch party, Walter took my hand in his, gently with a smile. You've built something beautiful, he said. I didn't do it alone, I replied. He chuckled. But you started it. with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart. And I nodded. And I'll end it with dignity, with truth, and with the strength that comes from surviving what was meant to destroy me. Because I wasn't no longer needed. I was just getting started. Backhand index pointing right, medium skin tone. If Margaret's journey moved you so far, share this story. Let it be a reminder that no one is ever too old to rise again. Comment your thoughts below, and subscribe for more powerful true life stories. Your voice matters. So does hers. So does yours. The weeks after Brian's arrest passed like a slow tide, calm on the surface, but surging with emotion just beneath. I thought I'd feel triumph, closure, maybe even pride, but mostly felt grief. Not for what I'd lost, but for what never really was. I sat in the courtroom during Brian and Amanda's joint hearing, watching as the judge read out their charges. Felony elder abuse, conspiracy to defraud, identity theft, attempted murder. Each count stacked like bricks on their backs. Brian stood motionless, lips pressed into a thin line. Amanda stared dead ahead, her face as cold as winter pavement. I'd once changed that man's diapers, sat beside his bed through high fevers, cheered at his graduation like it was the moon landing. And now I was testifying against him. When they asked me to speak, I stood slow but steady, hands trembling slightly. My voice, though tired, held the weight of every silent night I had ever endured. They didn't just try to steal my money. They tried to erase me. Quietly, neatly, like I was just an old coat they didn't wear anymore. But I am not a coat. I am a woman, a mother, wife, a human being with a name, a story, and a fire that doesn't go out just because the world stops looking. The room was still. Even Brian finally looked at me. And I saw it. That flicker. Shame. But it was too late. The judge denied both their bails permanently. Trial would proceed. And the evidence against them, thanks to Sarah's recordings and Detective Archer's persistence, was overwhelming. Outside the courthouse, reporters flooded the sidewalk. Flashbulbs went off. But I didn't stop to speak. Because the real battle, the one inside me, wasn't over. That night, I sat on the cottage porch, wrapped in Gerald's old flannel shirt. The air smelled of honeysuckle. I looked up at the stars and asked the question I hadn't dared speak aloud until now. What kind of mother raises a son who can do this? Walter joined me with 2 cups of chamomile tea. "You're blaming yourself again," he said, reading me like an open book. I just keep thinking, maybe if I'd hugged him more. Or less. Maybe if I hadn't worked 2 jobs. Maybe if I'd told him no more often. Walter placed the tea in my hands. "Maybe nothing, Maggie. Sometimes people make choices that have nothing to do with how they were raised. Sometimes they lose their way." I stared at my reflection in the tea's surface. "And what if I lost my way too?" He shook his head. "You didn't. You survived. You found your way back." A tear slid down my cheek. I let it fall. I didn't wipe it away. "I miss the boy he was," I whispered. Walter leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the stars. "That boy is gone. But you're still here. And the woman sitting beside me. She's made of iron." In the days that followed, I kept moving forward. The Daniels Foundation grew faster than we expected. Volunteers signed up from across the country. We hosted workshops for caregivers and seniors. I even recorded a podcast episode titled, Invisible No More, that reached over 1 million downloads in a week. But something kept gnawing at me. My legacy. Not just the foundation. Not the story that went viral. I wanted something that couldn't burn down. Something that would outlive even the memory of Amanda's cruelty and Brian's betrayal. So I started writing a book. Not a memoir. Letter. To women like me. To women who'd been told they were too old, too much, too quiet, too soft. Each chapter told a different story. Stories from other grandmothers I met, survivors of manipulation, abandonment, quiet abuses. I titled it Still Standing, the stories they tried to silence. One day, as I was writing in the garden, Ellie rushed out with her phone in hand. "Margaret," she said breathlessly, "you need to see this." She showed me a video. Brian. From his prison cell. He was speaking to a reporter. Tears in his eyes. Voice trembling. I don't expect forgiveness. What I did. It's not defensible. I was weak. I let greed and pressure twist my soul. But I want to say this clearly. My mother didn't deserve what I did to her. And if I could trade my sentence to give her one peaceful year back, I would. I sat there stunned. It didn't change anything. But it cracked something. Just a little. Door. And I didn't walk through it, but I saw it. Maybe someday, forgiveness would live behind it. But not today. 2 weeks later, the judge handed down the sentence. Amanda, 25 years without parole. Brian, 18 years with possibility for parole after 12. I didn't attend the sentencing. I was planting roses that day. The real kind. The living kind. The kind that grow through thorns and bloom anyway. The day Still Standing was published. I held the first copy in my hands and cried. Not because of pain. Because of peace. Walter, standing beside me, kissed my forehead. Gerald would be proud. And I smiled. Because for the first time in years I believed that too. The cottage is quiet now. Not lonely. Peaceful. Sometimes Sarah and the kids visit. Sometimes Ellie and I sit on the porch and sip lemonade and don't say anything at all. Because we don't need to. We already know the truth. We are needed. We are seen. We are still here. To be continued. In the life I finally chose. Backhand index pointing right medium sin, and thank you for following Margaret's story to the end. If it touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us. No matter our age, we are never too old to fight, to heal, and to rise again.